This month, in recognition of B.B. Moore Campbell, National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, Unapologetically Black Unicorns is proud to present a special 5-part series on Black youth mental health, supported by HopeLab and featuring the HopeLab HBCUs, Historically Black Colleges and Universities, Translational Science Fellows. The music featured throughout this series comes from A New Deal for Youth, an album produced through a New Deal for Youth initiative, a program of the National Collaborative for Youth Policy. It amplifies the voices, creativity, and leadership of young people. We hope this series informs, motivates, and reminds us all of the importance of investing in mental health and well-being of Black youth. So let's cue the music and let's get into it.
New deal for youth. What you wanna do here? New deal for youth. What you wanna do here? New deal. Change it up, I need a new feel. New deal. My problems is too real. New deal.
All right, well, welcome back to Unapologetically Black Unicorns. And this is our exciting series on Black youth mental health, particularly with HopeLab and its project with HBCU fellows. And I have one of the fellows here with me today, and that is Dr. Billie Castle. So, Dr. Castle, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself before we launch into the conversation.
Hello, my name is Dr. Billie Castle. I'm originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I always like to say that. So, my accent or my flair is very Louisiana. I'm currently an assistant professor of public health sciences at Xavier University of Louisiana, located in New Orleans. My research and really through this HBCU fellowship, I'm very much transitioning into being a translational researcher, where using research, many of our theories and frameworks to how do we advance policy to truly change the way we interact with our environment to improve our health outcomes.
Wow. Okay. Amazing. And why is it important, do you think, to focus on HBCUs? And I'm using an acronym, and I always say on my podcast, okay, spell out what the acronym is, because I never know who's listening, who knows what. So let's get everybody on the same page. And HBCU is a historically Black college and university. So that's what a HBCU is. Xavier University of Louisiana, right? Is that the whole?
Yes, we are actually, Xavier's actually the only Catholic HBCU out of the 109 HBCUs. And I do also want to distinguish, I did graduate from Howard University as well. So I come from an HBCU family. I am a second generation HBCU graduate. So our family truly is invested in historically Black institutions, thinking about how it has shaped so many people who make impact daily or who've made impacts in the past. For us, it's about the culture and belonging and truly being around people that look like you, that have similar interests, but with one common goal in mind. It's to succeed and be the best that you can be.
Yeah, my dad was a HBCU graduate. I was not, so I didn't.
It's okay.
Don't come for me. Don't come for me. I went to
No.
Temple. I went to Temple University, and everybody thinks Temple is a HBCU. It is not a. I think it's a land grant school, but it is not an HBCU. But nonetheless, I got kind of close.
You are a product of an HBCU, as
Yes.
well as thinking about you being intentional about having the HBCU fellows participating in this discussion. For me, I think about, yes, HBCU graduates or attendants, but I also think about we also need people who are supporters, who understand the importance and the legacy and history of HBCUs as well. Like, we need those allies and supporters to also be around, even if you didn't graduate from an HBCU.
Boop, boop. Okay, so I feel good now. So I feel worthy. So let's talk a little bit about your well, first of all, you've been doing work related to Black youth violence prevention. So, can you talk a little bit about your focus on Black youth, and then we'll go into what your project is through the HBCU Fellowship?
Sure. So I will say that I always knew whatever I wanted to do, I wanted to make an impact in Black communities. Since I was in undergrad and even thinking about going through like my graduate school, I knew that what I was learning and the tools and the research and just the projects I was engaged in, I knew that my talent and tools and all of that, I wanted to dedicate to Black communities. So during my PhD studies, we established a Youth Violence Prevention Research Center at the University of Louisville. And the goal during that time, youth violence was truly on the rise in the city. And still, as we think about the defundment of youth programs and youth third spaces, there was this increase in violence. So the city saw a direct correlation between closing the Office of Youth Development and really divesting from youth programs like after school, community centers, that there was an uptick in youth violence. So the research that we did was really thinking about it from like a social norming perspective, because a lot of work really thinks about bringing in my public health background, how things happen on an individual level, but we were truly looking at the community and like social context in which youth violence was taking place. So what were the social norms? Why were people participating in it? How do we speak about violence as a community, as a city, and really addressing it from that perspective? And a part of it came into, as we talk about history and culture, is like knowing where you're from, knowing where you belong, and your sense of belonging in community was a part of the intervention that was developed. But it was really focusing on how do we also reframe youth violence as we think about youth or children, even in particular? You are born into a certain environment. You are born into your community. So that doesn't mean you are born into thinking, I'm going to be violent. You are born into the circumstances, and it dictates the decisions and behaviors that you will either participate in or you don't participate in.
Mhm.
So when we think about, even how do we choose the food that we eat? We choose based on what's available instead of waking up. Some mornings I do wake up and say I want something sweet to eat. But I can only really make decisions or base my behaviors on what I have available to me. And so that's how we talked about and framed youth violence. And so even as I continue my work, one of the things that I've made sure to include is because when we do a lot of public health planning, we do tend to either add youth at the end or just like have it to say, oh, we had youth participating. I have a good friend who introduced me to social justice youth development and thinking about youth are very knowledgeable. They are experts in their own experience. So how do we also the decisions that we are making will impact them as they grow older. So, how do we incorporate youth into the groundwork of our public health planning, interventions, and work so that as we are building, we are also working with them so they can build the world in the communities they want to live in? And so, the project that I'm doing for HopeLab, I worked with the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council here in New Orleans. Mayor Cantrell had a really great structure of the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council, and I worked with their director, Miss Lakita Smith, where she was very intentional about not only like leadership development, but what issues do the youth want to address? So we did a photo voice project, and they were really interested in policy. And two topics that came up over the past like 2 or 3 years I worked with them were youth mental health and climate change, and the connection between the two, especially here in Louisiana, but the Gulf South. and how, all these climate events are happening. And so for my project, I proposed working with youth on an advocacy training, really training them on advocating at the state and federal level, because a lot of the policies they are needed around youth mental health and climate change really need to be moved at the state and federal level. So I've been working with some New Orleans youth on first training around different advocacy methods. We're doing research. They're learning how to do pitches. How would you testify? Just different ways to advocate. Since social media is a huge part of their life, they're like, we want to do some social media advocacy. So thinking about how do we one, provide the tools in the training and space for youth to be able to speak up and speak out for themselves, because they have really great ideas. So for me, I'm just like, how can I help you craft those ideas into policy and advocacy, and then provide those opportunities to connect with like state and federal decision makers to be able to push that agenda forward?
So number one, I'm just wowing over here because, well, number one, I'm a policy geek, so this like, charges me. And I'm also invested on lifting up the voices of Black and Brown people to be in the policy advocacy space. So the things that you're talking about to, really focus on Black youth is just amazing, and I will say so needed. So have you found any disparities relative to like Kuchina babies, for example, and young people being forgotten? How was that different for Black youth, or the whole Black community was kind of forgotten? Like how did Black youth interpret how they were also left behind?
Yeah, so if we think about, and last year was the 20th anniversary of, I don't like to say anniversary, but commemorative, you know,
Yes.
commemorating Hurricane Katrina. And one of the consistent things that have come out of those conversations has been how, of course, we think about New Orleans. Everybody loves New Orleans. You love the food. You love going down to the French Quarter. You love Bourbon Street. And so tourism is really big. The tourism of New Orleans is really big for the state of Louisiana. And so the priority was making sure that the areas that generate the most money were back up and running as fast as it really could. And so when recovery happened, that was the priority. The other thing was I have a project where I work with community members in the Lower Ninth Ward and hearing their stories. I don't do it justice telling their story, and I don't want to feel as if I am, but hearing the stories of how, people wanted to come back home. There are so many issues about how much money FEMA distributed based on where people live. So we're thinking about, for me, I would call it recovery redlining. So similar to how people were receiving loans in redlined neighborhoods, we could see a direct correlation to receiving FEMA recovery assistance based on your neighborhood. Especially if you maybe were a renter, or the way in which our homes are valued, we see a stark difference between neighborhoods that are traditionally Black and those that are not. And so a lot of it comes down to the economic part of how it has truly impacted how people were able to come back to the city. Same thing for schools. I think that was a big thing, especially for youth. They were either consolidating schools, schools were destroyed because of the hurricane, or we see the charter school system come in and take over in the city. And now, what these traditional schools around neighborhoods are now lost. And so it truly has changed like the culture of the city. And even now the city's expensive, and how it's driving out true natives of New Orleans who've been there for generations, who make New Orleans what it is. Why do we come to New Orleans? It's because of the culture, it's the soul, it's the people. And a lot of the people who make up the true essence of New Orleans are not able to afford it, and not even just because of how much it costs, but if we even think about how much people make. And so, since it's a hospitality driven city, a lot of the people who are in the hospitality industry or entertainment industry um, really are fighting. It's a true fight in the city to keep New Orleans and its culture alive. And so I do believe all of these things correlate, thinking about it from like the climate perspective, mental health perspective. When it rains, if it rains a little too much, it's still flooding in certain areas. And so, how have we also received the federal or state recovery dollars to do flood mitigation projects? Is also a part of that. So, when I say mental health, like if it rains too much, or if another hurricane is coming, thinking about how does that impact your mental health and how you feel, or people not even coming back to the city because it's too much. So those are all the things that are a part of that.
Yeah, yeah. And so when you're working with the young people, and I'm so glad you use the term or the paradigm for social justice, youth development. How have the youth been involved? Like for our listeners, can you give examples how they've been involved in your project?
Yeah, so first I have employed research assistants from Xavier's, because my true goal is how do I also train the next generation of public health researchers to be able to do this themselves. So first I have research assistants learning different methods, techniques, writing, all of those things, but they are also very instrumental. I have them also leading some of the sessions. So, what are some things you want to see? What do you hear from other youth? Like, how do we really make this like youth centered and focused? I'm like, I don't want to be the one talking and doing all the talking. I want to work alongside you all to truly do this work. So that's like one part of it. The other part is I did hear, okay, mental health and climate change were some of the top issues that youth wanted to focus on, but we also start with like truly getting into what topics we want to focus on, having a like democratic way to decide that, and then who do we need to come in and speak to us, because I am not the expert on all things. So who are some colleagues or people in the field that can come in and speak with you all? And then each one of them, which actually I spoke with my research assistants yesterday, and they were like, we need a time for students to, yes, we have these two topics, but if there's something else they're interested in, let's let them present on another issue. We give them feedback and talk about how we can integrate into this project. I'm like, great idea. And so for me, it's just, this is the bones of it. Like we're doing advocacy training, but what exactly do you all want to focus on, and how can I help you achieve the goals that are, yes, within what I'm working on, but also goals that help you achieve what you are interested in as well.
Mhm. And so through this process and project, like what have been some learnings for you about like working with young people?
Our communication sometimes is different, which is cool. I understand that even when I was a little younger, I probably was like, okay, I don't talk like that either. But so
Mhm.
I realized that. Another thing is, again, youth have really great ideas. They are great leaders. I always start off with like, you are an expert in your own experience. I cannot tell you that what you're experiencing is right or wrong, but um, as an expert, how do we, mobilize for change around what you're interested in? And so what I've learned is, while yes, this is my project and I may be driving some of those things, we really have awesome youth who are interested in advocacy, who are interested in policy, and really interested in making a change. I think As Louisiana is in this fight right now around like voting rights or representation, our youth are really interested in being involved. And for me, it's just like, how do we make way and space to make sure that their voices are heard and centered in these conversations? Because, yes, we are talking about our own current representation, but they also represent our youth.
Mhm.
And so they need to be involved in the crafting of this legislation, speaking out. Um, about the legislation and some of my, since the session goes until June, we're gearing up to go to the Capitol in the next couple of weeks. And some of my students are very interested in engaging around the current legislation around the maps in Louisiana. And so thinking about how they are paying attention, they are interested, but we just need to make sure that they are at the forefront and have those opportunities.
Wow. So, and I think it's interesting too, even though your project started off as mental health and climate, I mean, the reality is that it's transferable skills into other areas of advocacy and policy. And yes, changing issues relative to voting and which might change representation can impact one's mental health.
Mhm.
So I also like this through line that everybody has mental health. What are the things that can impact it? And they're kind of learning skills to fight or to advocate for things that will also help with their mental health, even though it might not seem direct. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
Also, and I'm not quite sure if this you can tell me and our audience if I've got it right. So for the fellowship, do you all work kind of as a community of practice, if you will? Like, are you learning other things from HopeLab fellows who, are doing their own projects? Do you guys like share information, share things that, yeah. So talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I think one of the beauties of this fellowship is being able to connect with other HBCU researchers. Of course, I like collaborate with my colleagues at Xavier, but I've been able to now collaborate with colleagues at other HBCUs. So in my cohort, we have colleagues from Spelman, Howard, Tennessee State, Winston-Salem State. Yes. So thinking about like now I have a larger network of Black researchers that I have been engaged with in research. And then we all are partnered with a fellow. So my fellow, hey Danny, is at Howard. And one of the great things that we are actually going to collaborate on this summer is having the youth who are participating in my training. They're going to record the training for a platform and create like a webinar. And Danny has been instrumental in connecting me on that. So for me, yes, I love that I'm able to like have the training happen live, but for the end product to be that, and my goal is that I want the youth who are participating in the training to actually be the trainers and not me being the trainer, is that she's connecting me with that opportunity. So I believe that is really great.
Mhm.
And, we hear about what everybody's doing and able to provide some input or feedback to truly strengthen all of our projects.
That's amazing. And I have partnered with your partner and have an adult policy thing that's very similar. So that's amazing. And I love the fact that it'll sit now in a virtual space that anybody can access. So that what your young people are doing in Louisiana, the skill set itself is transferable to other types of advocacy topics as well as in other places. So that's very, very cool. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and you said that they're going to be going to the Capitol. What are some of your hopes and dreams ultimately for this work that you're doing with Black youth through the project?
I am hoping they are going to impact policy that benefits them, directly, but either indirectly as well. And so I also want them to like build relationships with decision makers and policymakers so that they are comfortable or thinking about like, how can I do this year round? You can always call or email your representative on all levels. So how can I do those things? How can I also get some more youth to do that as well? How can we all show up at a city council meeting? How can we all show up at the state capitol? Thinking about we do see youth mobilize for action. Honestly, I think about that as, here we've been talking about the Civil Rights Act. And I think about it was young people who were the ones who were the catalysts for many of the movements, thinking about the boycotts, the freedom riders. It was youth. And so everyone's like, well, who's the leaders who's stepping up? But are we still making space and room for our youth to be those people instead of
Mhm.
thinking about we're looking for someone, or in that case, they just did it. And so that is what I'm thinking about. How can
Wow.
they be inspired to not feel as if we are looking for the adults to lead us or they be in charge, but truly thinking about all of these movements started with youth?
Oh, that is the most powerful thing I have heard in a long time. And I always have to remind myself when I think of people like Representative John Lewis, he was a young person,
He was.
and it's like Martin Luther King too. So, but we think of them in their adult embodiment because
Right.
so yeah, that is so powerful to remember that and to share that and to do what you're doing, which is to build that. So that's amazing. I was going to ask another question around translational science. So again, a term. What does that mean? You talked about exactly what it looks like, but let's kind of maybe formally define it.
Say informally define it, but
Okay.
formally define it because I just think about being in higher education in the academy. A lot of times, our worth or promotions, or all of these things are tied up on scholarship we produce, and many of that is seen as like journal articles. When I think about translational science, I think about how community can utilize these things in real time and not wait for a journal article to be published. And even if it's published, if it's open access or not, or if it's in all of this academic jargon that they cannot understand or utilize. So I think about translational science as the applicable ways, and for me, I'm particularly thinking about community as my audience because I am a community engaged researcher. But how can they apply this in real time?
Yeah.
And so as I mentioned, I did a photo voice project with youth locally because it's just like, yes, we can do this research, but it doesn't have to look like an article all the time. It can look like an exhibit of the pictures you've taken in your neighborhood, how it made you feel, and what you want to see in the future as change. And so for me, it's just like, how do we translate these great theories, all of these frameworks, all of these things into action?
Yeah. Need more of that. So this is wonderful. So, Dr. Castle, we're coming towards the end of our chat, which number one, people can't see me because I don't record video, but I'm taking notes. I'm over here like taking notes and writing down things and things that I'm going to follow up on. And at the end as we wrap up, I always want to give our guests an opportunity to do what I call a wisdom drop. And that's that one last bit of information that you want to leave the audience with. It could be inspirational, it could be action oriented, it could be to talk about something we didn't get a chance to talk about in our conversation. So this is your moment to do that wisdom drop.
I'm just gonna say either get with it or get to the side. I don't think we have enough time to sit around and, test this, figure this out. Like you got to get with it, get with the change, or you need to get to the side. And so that is, I'm gonna keep it that simple.
Yes, yes, yes. I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I want to thank you for spending this time with me on Unapologetically Black Unicorns. And I'm so glad that you're part of the HopeLab HBCU Fellowship Project. It's been so fantastic to talk to some of the fellows. I've hung out with many of them, but talk to some of the fellows on the podcast so folks can hear more about the work that you're doing. It's amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Castle.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this special Black Youth Mental Health series from Unapologetically Black Unicorns. You can listen to the complete series on our YouTube playlist as each episode is released, and you can find a link to A New Deal for Youth, the album featured throughout this series, in the show notes. So join us next week for another power-filled convo with one of the HopeLab HBCU Translational Science Fellows. And until then, you be you, because there's only one